Hey guys, Zotek here. This video is going to cover how I went from Silver Elite to 2500 ELO on FACEIT in roughly 6 months. In it, we're going to cover my daily routine and a few of the principles that I find most helpful when practicing a new game. Now, of course, I do have some advantages. I've been able to compete at world-class levels across a variety of games, one of those most importantly being another FPS. And yes, some skill and knowledge does transfer, particularly for team-based situations. However, when I first began playing Counter-Strike, I was placed at Gold Nova and deranked almost instantly to Silver Elite, where I remained for my first month of playing the game. During this first month, I was not practicing yet. I was seeing whether or not I enjoyed the game. Once I began my practice routine, I quickly improved. So with that said, let's get started. Step 1. Building a roadmap. The most important thing to do when you want to improve is to pick your objective. What is your end goal? Do you want to go pro? Do you want to get out of silver? This goal guides everything you will do when you practice. But before you get into the game and start practicing, you need to write out what I call my player Bible. This is, in your own words, a detailed description of the player you want to be. This will make up your roadmap for all of your future practices. While this Bible should be unique to you and your specific goals, you can see an example on the screen now. As you can see, this is not a simple exercise. You need to break down every single detail of what your final product looks like. This list should be exhaustive. In the example provided, you'll notice that it includes not only items like spray transfer or aim, but also things like mental game and maintaining focus. In your own, you need to do your best to break down each item you recognize into its constituent skills and to drill down as deeply and accurately as possible. Once you have finished writing your player Bible, and this can take several hours, you now have your roadmap in front of you. You now have a list of skills you can improve on to ensure you are constantly and systematically progressing toward your goal. Once you've finished with this writing exercise, you're not quite done. But first, it's time to get to work. You need to spend the next week or two playing the game and observing yourself carefully in relation to this roadmap. After this period, go through every single skill in your player Bible and rate yourself on a scale of F to A. Rating yourself A at a given skill means, relative to your current level, you don't feel that that skill holds you back. And F means the opposite. So, if you feel like your communication is good for where you are, then it would be a B or an A. But if you feel like your recoil control is relatively worse than your peers, then it would be a D or an F. Keep in mind, it can be very hard to stay objective, so hire a coach if you find yourself struggling to identify areas to improve. At the end of this stage, you not only have an accurate picture of where you are, you now have a well-defined roadmap for where to go. Each day, I select 2 items from my own list, in addition to a daily maintenance routine, to work on. The first is an easy item that I know I can improve on. The second, an item that I currently feel is holding me back the most. This allows me to see both visible progress every single day by working on the easy to improve skill, while also putting in work to address my greatest weaknesses. An important note is that this writing exercise should be repeated every couple of months. As your knowledge and understanding of a game grows, you'll be able to dive deeper and deeper into previously unrecognized or underdeveloped skills. Step 2. Building a technical foundation. Mechanics, mechanics, mechanics. Counter-Strike is no different than any other game. Until the highest levels, mechanics are king. If you had the choice between being the smartest player in the world or the most mechanical, you should pick the most mechanically skilled every single time. So when I started practicing, I broke my mechanical foundation into 3 main areas. 1. Movement. 2. Gun mechanics. And 3. Protocols and positioning. First, movement. Good movement doesn't mean hitting crazy bunny hops, nailing long jumps, or even having perfect pathing. Good movement means something simpler. Being able to do whatever you want with your character fluidly and comfortably. It's important to stop at this point to discuss something about the way your brain works. Until you have mastered a skill to the point of automaticity, you will constantly need to devote some amount of concentration on that skill if you want to use it. This is why you so often see new players attempt to pick up a gun in such an awkward fashion. It's not that they don't realize their mistake, they simply haven't mastered effective and fluid movement. So moving to a specific spot or picking up a certain gun at a given position requires extra thinking, and they lose focus on their part. The corollary of this means that having subpar movement will negatively impact every other aspect of your gameplay, since movement is something you do nearly constantly. So, particularly when I started off, my practice session each day began by exploring one of the competitive maps. I would open a private server, launch my practice config, and spend the next hour or so running through a chosen map for the day. However, and this is another important concept, I wasn't simply running around in circles. I was 100% focused. Every few minutes I would switch between working on air strafing, or stopping in a precise position, or crosshair placement, or even simply finding and exploring new grenades or angles throughout the map. This focused, deliberate practice is incredibly important no matter what you're trying to improve. Not only was I practicing movement in these specific controlled environments each day, in many pug or matchmaking games I would spend the entire time focused only on making clean, precise movements, depending on which items in my roadmap I was working on. Once I had achieved a decent level of fluidity, this became a smaller part of my daily practice, though I still include at least a few minutes of deliberate practice on movement each day. Second, gun mechanics. In addition to my daily movement practice, I work on my gun mechanics each day. I largely split this between recoil control and various types of aiming. I start off by using the YPRAC Aim Arena as a warm-up for my recoil training. I find this an incredible tool for fixing mistakes in my specific recoil pattern. Once I'm satisfied that my recoil is sufficiently warm, I go into the Recoil Master Pro map and set it to a distance of 5. Here, I spray 50 full clips, trying my hardest to pay attention to where I am missing the bullets. Am I pulling down too far to the right, to the left, too quickly? Again, 100% focus is the goal. Afterward, I track my average percentage accuracy in Google Sheets. I repeat this process with the M4A4 and, more recently, the FAMAS and Galil. Some days I also use the YPRAC pre-fire mode to practice spray transfers, but that's a smaller part of my process. This takes roughly 30 minutes a day. For the aim component, I deathmatch between 800 and 1,000 kills each day, largely on Tarek.gg or warm-up server community servers. This takes roughly 2 hours per day. Every 50 kills or so, I switch up my main focus, keeping in mind the areas from my roadmap I want to work on for the day. I often use this time to also work on my mental game, staying calm or focused for extended periods of time. I want to take a moment to address Aim Botz, the map. I do not believe this helps very much at all for developing aim. While I think it can be useful in niche situations, practicing specific flicks hundreds of times in a small period, for example, it can't hold a candle to simple deathmatch. I think it's gained popularity largely due to people's egotism and avoidance of real practice. Deathmatching can be tilting, frustrating, and damaging to your ego. Aim Botz is, by comparison, far easier and avoids a lot of the frustrations of deathmatch. However, this comes at the cost of being far worse practice. Finally, protocols and positioning. These can be some of the hardest things to work on. Not because they're necessarily difficult, but because it's hard to find efficient practice techniques. What I did, starting off, was to break the game down into individual basic scenarios for each map, and write out each possible scenario in a document. An example is on the screen now. I then researched professional pug or match footage to learn various approaches to each of those situations. More than the specific decisions or protocols themselves, I would constantly pause and force myself to go through the 5 whys method. It's far more important to understand why a player or team does something in a given situation than to simply copy the specifics of what they do. This is how you develop a true understanding of what to do, allowing you to play creatively and uniquely in any given situation rather than simply parroting actions already seen. Once I felt I had a solid grasp on the reasoning behind a positional decision or a protocol, I would use a technique known as Shadowboxing. I would join a private server and run through drills in my mind against the various situations I saw in the pro matches. While there are no real opponents, I would shoot, dodge, and imagine incoming utility as though there were. I would imagine counters to my position and hypothesize ways that I could counter those counters. I would then join a pug and test out my execution, playing those positions and identifying any flaws afterward. To this day, I'm not sure if this is the best way to practice the mechanics and basics of positioning, but it's the best I've found in my years of competing. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below if you have any ideas on your end or if you have new techniques that have worked for you. Step 3. Repetition and study. This final step brings it all together. Whenever I would play a game outside of my daily practice, such as a pug or a matchmaking game, I would think about how I had played. I would reflect on that, and if I felt I didn't do my best in a game, I would spend time reviewing the demo, analyzing my gameplay in relation to the list of skills created in my player Bible, and then focus my practice accordingly. I would do the same after each daily practice session as well. The key is to always be analyzing yourself, relentlessly pushing to identify mistakes and errors and optimizations. One important thing to note is that I find most mistakes or errors are not only technical, but often are accompanied by mental mistakes, such as autopiloting or losing focus. So do your best to make sure you are constantly on the lookout for these mental mistakes as well. So that's it. That's my full daily practice routine. You can see it here on the screen. I've followed this religiously for the last 12 months and will continue following this method until the day I no longer compete. And remember, while I play, while I practice, my goal is never to win. My goal is, above everything else, to improve. If you can consistently improve over time, everything else becomes inevitable. So while I play, I focus as much as possible on the 2 areas of practice for the day, whatever they are, and everything else is secondary. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for the support throughout the years. I hope this helps you pave your own roadmaps to improve at whatever it is you enjoy. I'll be streaming every day over on Twitch, but subscribe and like if you enjoyed this video. I've got a lot more content coming your way. And as always, until next time, peace.